let's give some seconds for our amazing panelists to join us here. Looks like everyone being here. We're so excited to have you here today. Um, all right, so let's get this event started. Today we're here to hear about Spring into Action, CRM adoption made easy with this awesome panelist, and we're so excited about the amazing content and takeaways you will get out of this event. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and highest quality community of those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they might not know about. We do that through live sessions like this one you are about to experience today, an online forum, our quarterly summits, and we are starting to get back to in-person events, and we are so excited about it. If you're not already a part of MSP, you will be invited to join after this event. But enough about MSP today. Our session is sponsored, it's made possible by the team at Intrahive. And I'll hand it over to Maddie to share more about the amazing work they're doing at Intrahive. Maddie, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Flagel, and I am the Director of Marketing Operations for Intrahive. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Intrahive platform, we capture and deliver customer intelligence to revenue teams when and where it matters most, so our customers can find, win, and grow their business. And we are thrilled to be sponsoring this webinar today with MSP because CRM adoption is one of those business challenges that cross industry lines. Regardless of what you do, storing and maintaining accurate customer data is paramount to being successful. And yet, so many companies struggle with process compliance in order to trust the data within. This is why we at Intrahive, or we developed Intrahive to automate the process of capturing and enriching customer data, so your teams can focus more on revenue generating activities while benefiting from rich, accurate data in your CRM. You can learn more by visiting our website, intrahive.com. And with that, I will pass it back to Eduardo and sit back with you all to learn some best practices from these incredible presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. That was amazing. And it's so great to have Intrahive as a partner of MSP. One last thing before we get started, those are the housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded, and you will be able to access the recording afterwards in our MSP website in the past events page. And once you're there, make sure you are checking the upcoming events, and you can sign up for other events too. And also, please use the Q&A question. I was talking with the panelists backstage, and they said they love answering questions. So please, let's shower them with questions today. Use the Q&A, or if you want to use the chat, you can also put your questions in the chat. There's no problem, but we would like you to use the Q&A function. And that's enough for me for now. I'm going to pass to Richard Lin, our amazing moderator today. And Richard, please introduce yourself and our amazing panelists, and I'll be back at the end for a little bit more about how you can get the most of this event. Richard.
Thanks, Eduardo, and thank you everybody for joining us today to talk about CRM adoption with our amazing group of panelists here. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Richard Lin, and I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at Atrium, where we focus on driving data-driven sales management into the market. I've been with the company for a little bit over 5 months, and I have a background in sales strategy and analytics, and also built data infrastructure in my past life. With that said, I would love to turn it over to the speakers to introduce themselves, and I think we can make things simple and go in order here as we are on this slide here. So Cindy, could you take us away?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Richard. My name is Cindy Hancock, Director of Revenue Operations, and I work at HighSpot.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam McKenna. I am the founder and CEO of #Sam Sales Consulting, and I've been in enterprise sales for about 15 years. So excited to talk shop about all things CRM today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Wing, Associate Vice President of Business Operations at LiveIntent.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves, and very excited to hear your thoughts on CRM adoption today. The decision to adopt a CRM or modernize your current CRM is vitally important. It is a vitally important step in a company's growth. And today, with the help of our esteemed panelists, we want to talk about not just the why, but the how of CRM adoption, from best practices to lived experiences. I'm very excited to dive deep on this subject. In terms of agenda today, we want to cover on really three sort of key points in the journey of CRM adoption. The basics, understanding why CRM adoption isn't an if, but a when. The challenges of implementing such a large technical transformation, and understanding struggles that the experts have paved the way out of so that you can improve systems and sustain them. And then the end game, the tools and techniques needed to not only initially roll out, but effectively integrate the system into your pre-existing processes. So that's a mouthful, and we can dive into each one in order. Let's start with the basics. If you've worked at a mature sales organization, having a CRM is part of life. But what if you're a startup or a small business scaling up market? When it comes time to graduate from spreadsheets or modernize your current CRM, ultimately, what are the drivers of this kind of thinking? And maybe we can kick off with Sam.
I think, well, even as a small business owner, having come from larger organizations, I can tell you one of the things that I love about implementing a CRM early stage is just the opportunity to set your foundation right for data. There is so much data that you have to play with, from who's attending your webinars to what's happening with your leads, your contacts, what they're doing on your website. I mean, there's so much that can feed into that. And the earlier you start and the more organized you can get, the better. You know, I think we've probably all been at sales organizations where our CRM data is a mess. And so what better way, right, to start off on the right foot and keep it really clean than in the early days?
Completely agree. I've been at a couple of organizations where we have not so much technical debt, but CRM debt. And so when you have an opportunity to come from a clean slate, it's amazing to be able to set things right and be able to see your path forward from there. Yeah, yep. Completely agree. Megan, do you have any thoughts on the not if, but when?
Sure. I think whether it's your executive team, your board of directors, no matter what stage your company is in, there's some sort of metric and stakeholders who need to be answered to. So really, whether you're small stage or larger, meeting your team where you are and understanding what those key metrics are will help you prioritize the right projects for your CRM. So really laying the groundwork at first, getting those high-level important metrics will help you ultimately down the line build on that, add those incremental metrics as your business matures.
Yeah, completely agree. Megan, I know you and I chatted earlier a little bit on evaluating from that sort of human first approach. So really excited to double click on that in a little bit. Cindy, I know we chatted a little bit before. I think last week we had a quick sync, and we talked a little bit about making the decision, the trade-off really between growing a business, growing your sales team, understanding your strategy, but also taking time to roll out a CRM and really making that trade-off decision. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would love, Sam, to hear your opinion on this too as a founder. But I think there's no time like the present, and doing it early and quickly as possible. It's in my mind really kind of a eat your vegetables type of thing, where you need to make the investment for long-term success, and doing that right away. And so if that means to slow down to speed up, then do it, because there's no way to, I think we all touched on this, data, how important that is to drive the right behaviors, to track the right outcomes and success. And then not only that, once you have all that data, be able to do inspection of connecting your activities to those outcomes to then either double down or pivot.
Yeah. We talk a lot about at Sam Sales, if you've heard the terminology, show me, you know me. That's one of the things that we bleed through, right, all day long. That's why it's framed back here. But I think that the data in your CRM is such a critical way to show your clients that you know them and your prospects that you know them. I used to be a leader over at LinkedIn, running LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and I have people that reach out to me all the time and they're like, "Are you familiar with LinkedIn Sales Navigator?" And I was like, I sure am, just a little bit, right? And whether it's your CRM and seeing how I engaged with you in the past, or even just doing it, your basic research on LinkedIn, I think that CRM, right, allows you, that data allows you to show somebody that what they've been doing with your website, how long they've been engaging with you as a brand, right? Closed lost opportunities before. I love it when a rep shows up to the table and says, I see you're a repeat buyer of our technology. I see that you're tied to 3 closed won opportunities over the last decade. Like, what has your experience been like? And I'm like, wow, that never happens, by the way, unless you're on my team. But just think of the value of that data in a CRM and how it can really prepare you to just be different when you walk up to the sales table.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's something that you maybe don't necessarily think about. You always think like user first when you're implementing your CRM, but the impact that has on your customer experience, I think is a great call out. Yeah.
Talk about buyer first right there. I love that instead.
Yeah.
I'm going to request that we have a large printed "Show Me You Know Me" sign in the atrium office here. It sort of aligns with one of our core principles of always learning something meaningful about your customers every single day, and that can be,
my week.
Yeah, supercharged just with a strong CRM adoption. Amazing. Thanks all for your thoughts on the basics. Let's think about the challenges a little bit, and really the struggles that really the folks here on this call, and I'm sure many folks who are listening in, have really worked through in order to bring a CRM to bear at a company. We've talked about the why, so let's get into the how. Megan, we actually had a chat earlier on evaluating rigorously the potential options that are in the industry today. Could you tell us about your approach?
Sure. I mean, I personally feel that there's an almost overwhelming number of options as far as the sales tool universe goes. But when it comes to prioritizing which of the many areas you want to explore with your team or that might help your team the most, I would say understanding the real process-related needs before making any tool investments is the way to go here. So one exercise that I've found helpful both in years past and to check back to from time to time is charting out the general sales cycle from prospecting all the way through closing a deal and what tools you have in place already for your processes with the team. So using that as a starting point when it comes to other conversations, like sales leaders who might want to request another new prospecting tool, and using that diagram to hold you all in that same place of truth to determine where we have those process gaps and maybe other tools to be replaced down the line if they're not serving their initial purpose, before investing both your effort and actual budget into new systems.
Can I I'll just add to that. I mean, like, what a fabulous point. The unbelievable amount of times that we consult with clients and we find redundant systems across the board, right? Where we're paying for the same thing 3 and 4 times and just didn't realize the full breadth of one technology. Such an awesome point, Megan.
I would totally agree. Something that I'm even thinking about now is taking that same framework and blowing it out to, all right, what tools do we need for IPO? And then how do we step level into that from now till then? And so I think that's great, but you have to look across the entire buyer's journey to be able to do that holistically.
Absolutely. And Cindy, to your point on the future planning, I like to try to prioritize, I would say, the top both time and budget investments for a calendar year as part of annual planning, but even having that, even just general outline of a year from now, 2 years from now, what major projects and even systems might we want to prioritize is helpful in that longer term roadmap and plan.
Sam, I'd love to hear about your lived experience spinning up your small business, what this looked like for you.
I think I will credit my dear friend Robin Addis, who was like, Sam, you need a CRM. And I was like, maybe. I was like, hold on, Google Sheets is good. And she was like, you're hurting my soul, stop. So I will say, it's a huge financial investment. It can be a big financial investment for a lot of organizations, right? But I think that this is one of the core places to start. Again, like just being able to, it astounds me when we kind of look at our workflows, the data inputs that we have, even just being able to see, where our traffic comes from. How do we convert our clients? And to Megan's point, also just looking through across the board for that sales cycle. What is it that we need to adjust as we go over time? A Google spreadsheet isn't going to give us any of that, right? We really need to look at data in aggregate and be able to start to see sources and things like that. So I will say, well, we've been up for almost 3 years. It's still about 2.5 year mark as a business. And we were lucky enough to close multi-million dollars in revenue last year as a business. It's still a big expense, but I think it's one of the most worthwhile ones for the data outputs that it gives you. So there's a couple of tools that I think are vital to a new business and to a sales team out of the gate. And that is one of my 4 core ones.
Amazing. And just to borrow a line from you, Sam, in our prep, I believe you said what gets measured gets done. And so it's hard to understand where the breakpoints are and really where the opportunities are unless you have a system in place.
Exactly. And think about that for your sales team too, right? So what are we measuring? How are we able to hold them accountable with the CRM data that we have? And if that's what we're measuring, if that's what we're holding them accountable to from a review perspective, a quota perspective, a spiff perspective, right? All of that data is readily available to you across dashboards and instant reports. So just an easy way to see what the health of your organization looks like according to what you're motivating them to do.
Yeah, I really like that. So this might be a little tactical, but would love to learn more from both of you how you're holding your teams accountable. Something that we have implemented in our instances is kind of like a completed or last updated field for specific things like account plans, or if you're using some type of sales methodology like MedPick or something like that. Is that just done through reporting? And then do you have an adoption or accountability goal that's like, hey, we just released account plans. You need to have 90% of your account plans done for X number of accounts by this date. Is that a process, something that you all work through with your teams?
Megan, I'll let you voice up first since your team and company is a little bit bigger than mine.
Sure. I would say we probably have maybe an opposite challenge of what Sam has today, but we've got years and years of data in our CRM. So where we prioritize and try to drive that update behavior is really with relation to outdated information. So whether that's marking contacts unqualified, which is always a challenge just given the volume there, or just making sure that pipeline that's been, I would say, stuck in a certain stage for too long without update. So using some of the date stamp fields there, as well as anything that has a close date that's in the past, and really keeping that cleaned up is where we try to drive the update related behaviors with the team in addition to general opportunity process adoption.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
No, just agreeing that all made sense.
I think one of the issues I've always had, and I've got some thoughts around this too, but one of the issues I've always had is how do we get rep adoption in our CRM? How do we motivate them to do? We know what they rarely do. And I think there's a couple tactics around that. But one of the things that we've built as a system here is just thinking about, do the fields impact our growth as a business? And then do the fields also impact that own reps development? So just as a quick thing that we do a little differently, when we close on an opportunity, we also look for everybody that was part of that buyer journey. So we've got fields for that. So we can say this was procurement, legal, champion, skeptic, 7 users. And while you might be listening to that thinking like, that's a lot of work and our reps will never do it, here's the cool thing. We actually take that data, we input it right in LinkedIn, and then we look to see and track where are people changing jobs. So has somebody that was part of our deal cycle before changed jobs? Can we capitalize on that? Because that's a really warm lead. Even if it's someone who touched us for like 4 weeks in procurement, hopefully they'll remember us because we were pleasant and lovely to work with. But we can reach out and say, congrats. We would love to talk to you in procurement at your new company. And so we just kind of talk about the logic of why those fields are there and how not only does it help our company, but it helps that individual as well funnel more leads across our team.
Love it.
I love that. We call them former champions here at Atrium, someone who is a champion for us at an existing customer who's moved on into a bigger and better role. And that gives us an amazing pursuit opportunity. So I'm a big fan of that. And I think it's incredible that you've been able to instrument that across LinkedIn and be able to receive notifications on that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience that actually I think is a really great segue into sort of our final phase here, which is what we're calling the end game, a focus on tools and techniques needed to effectively integrate a new system into your pre-existing processes. And so my thoughts on this are CRM adoption. It doesn't end with buying some software and entering your license key. So how do you ultimately work that into the day-to-day of a busy sales org? And from the audience here, the specific question was, what tactics have been put into practice to encourage not only usage, but appropriate usage by reps and sales forces in using corporate CRM outside of forcing them, of course?
The whip doesn't work these days, I guess, anymore. The carrot and the stick. I'll just say on mine, I think if I can speak to anybody who's super selfishly motivated, like I am, I always want to look good and overperform and overdeliver. To me, just having my CRM updated as a rep, but also as a leader, it just felt like something that I could do to stand out as a way to be different, because we know that adoption's not great. So I would think, number one, just think about that, right? Like, it helps you stand out, like your T's are always crossed, your I's are always dotted. I think the other thing, if you're a leader talking to sales reps and you're thinking about how do we get more adoption, keep in mind that every note and input that we have in our CRM is our opportunity to tell our story. So about where I am with the deal, what next steps are, who I've engaged and multi-threaded with. Like, this is my chance to, again, look different, but to really let my story shine about what's in my pipeline, what's coming through, what I've done with my accounts. That's me without having to be there. I know there's always these kind of memes that go around where the sales manager says, like, what's your forecast? And the rep's like, it's in Salesforce. And he's like, yeah, but just tell me anyway, what's your forecast? If you do have that all buttoned up, you'll find that your manager will probably ask you for that information less. So just a great way to be efficient, look better as a team, as an individual, and have less reporting to do in the long run. Now that the selfish one has gone.
I love something my team sometimes, it's like, it's kind of like managing up, but it's like training the behavior of your customer or the person that's consuming the data. And you sometimes, you do have to train your manager to be like, hey, I filled this in and I'm doing it consistently and ongoing. So you're like training them to look at that versus asking you the question. So that's great. That's great. Yeah.
I think you're so right. And that becomes part of your internal brand, right? Like we talk a lot about that on our side. Like, what's your brand externally? Sure. But what is it internally as well? Like, what an awesome way to stand out and just build that consistent brand by always being the person that has everything locked and loaded.
Right. And then you can also train or coach the managers to call that out. Like in those team meetings, emails, whatever, and just kind of re-motivate or continue to motivate on that behavior. One other thing that has helped me is bringing reps into the process. Sam, something that you had talked about is every field that you design or build inside your CRM is usually tied to a business outcome or generating revenue in some kind of way. And if you can bring in your rep to be like, hey, I'm really trying to drive this business outcome, what do you think is the best way for us to encourage this behavior? And bring them into that design and say they become champions, they can test it out for you. They can, and as a tester or champion, they can tease out the bugs and also share with you that, wow, this really helped me see this piece of data, this specific insight, and then I was able to take this action. And then they can tell their other reps, and it just cycles into this really great way to adopt it without having to be like, you have to use this. So it's another tactic that we've used, and the champion kind of beta POC iterative approach has worked really well for us.
Totally agree there, Cindy. Even as it relates to some larger CRM projects, say Salesforce Lightning rollout or other UI revamps, I've really turned to user experience principles as it relates to getting the team on board and my stakeholders on board for these changes. So doing things like developing who your personas of your users of the CRM are, and meeting in focus groups, building those champions, but also giving them that space to say, hey, I don't like how this works today. And actually, I do some of this work in a spreadsheet over here on the side to get those insights for where real improvements can be made to then drive those behaviors as well.
Yeah, thanks.
And you
Megan,
guys
for
nailed it just on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just on the leadership front. I mean, right? Just think about how that comes across as a leader, of bringing in your stakeholders, bringing in your top performers, bringing in people who would love to be a part of a SWAT team. You know, as you roll out new technologies, not even just thinking about the CRM, but other things that you're thinking about. What a great way to make them feel included in the process, to let their voices be heard, build great morale. You know, it's not even just about that tool and technology, but all the other impact it has. So Cindy and Megan, I think, like, just such great points there.
How do you all think of post-launch? You know, I know that we spend a lot of time thinking about strategy and making the right decisions, but eventually a decision is made and a system is launched, and there's always going to be some friction, I feel, with a new system. So how do you sort of solicit feedback against a brand new system?
Yeah, I would say starting out pre-launch, defining how will I know if this was a success, whether that's specific metrics, feedback related items, and really following up, whether it's in survey form, in reporting, to make sure you're understanding how that went after a certain time period post-launch.
I think to me, it always comes back to how we also make sure the training sticks, right? So it's making sure that we've got leaders who also follow through with the things that we're trying to get people to adopt. So making sure that there's that consistency of, you know, are we doing this? Have you updated your records? Let's do some inspection along the way. I think really important. I think too, just a great call out, Megan, that you mentioned, thinking about this also from the sales rep's perspective that might be selling a CRM technology or selling another kind of technology. What an easy land and expand opportunity. What does success look like? How are we doing in helping you make sure you get there, right? And those check-ins after the contract signs, because if we don't know what success looks like, and if we're not helping drive that adoption forward, right, we're missing a massive opportunity with our clients.
I really like the touch on the managers versus the rep. Something that we utilize is we do manager training first, so that they are in the know and then know what to say when reps have questions around the new process. And so I think that's huge. The other thing that we try to do is once we launch something, we of course have training or courses that are at the time of launch, but then post that, it's what does the just-in-time training look like? So are there content assets that are available for just-in-time? Like when I'm creating the quote, I forgot how to do ramp deals. I need to do it in the time, or I need the information, the training in the time that I'm actually executing on that action. Because we all know from an enablement standpoint, HighSpot being an enablement company, 80% of what you train in a meeting or in a training just goes out the door once the rep leaves. So that just-in-time training is really important.
I'm just going to capitalize on everything you guys are saying and then take it into a different positive direction. So yes, also think about that with Cindy's note about that, the just-in-time training across the board. Your Gen Z and your millennial reps are asking for that. They want that training on demand when they want it and in short form. So think about, if you do want adoption of whatever it is that you're trying to do, med picks, new sales techniques, CRM, how do you have that available, and are you giving it to them in a way that they want to learn? Great point on that just-in-time piece.
Cool. The other thing I'll add in regards to bringing it back to maybe feedback is continuing on the bring them into the process. We do something where we do surveys or check-ins every 90, 60 days or quarterly. We kind of essentially turn it into a program where, hey, let's optimize this over time and iterate over time, which is a very different muscle or skill than a one-time project where you implement and then you go off to the next. And so we try to bring them in to get their feedback, almost like an NPS of like, we want to improve this from a 6 to a 9 over time, and bringing them in that way.
Amazing, amazing thoughts here today on CRM adoption. I feel like I've learned a lot. We do have some time carved out for Q&A from the audience, and we have a couple of questions here teed up, but please, for folks in the audience, continue to hit us with the questions. We have 3 amazing experts here today, so let's try to tap into their knowledge. We've got one question here from the audience. How true is this? CRM adoption for reps starts when they spend less time in the CRM. Reflecting on Salesforce.com's sales report in 2019 that found reps spend 64% of their time not selling. How would you kind of approach this and say, CRM is a waste of time. You need to be in front of customers and selling constantly. Any thoughts? Maybe we can start with Sam.
I think this goes just back to making sure that we have fields that make sense in our CRM. So if we are asking, just think of this for every rep we have. What's the division of labor? The time and the hours that they've got during their day, and what is it that we really want them doing? Do we want them to be spending 20 or 30% of their time inputting data into the CRM, or do we really want them to focus on the things that are core and super important to our business? And maybe we can think about the other fields and data points that we can outsource so we can give to another team. Those reps are very expensive, right? As we know from an OTE perspective, and the talented ones that are really the A players and, maybe even our B+ players, we want them to be in front of their customers as much as we can. So I think it is really important that we have that data, but make sure that it's not overwhelming so that they don't just say, this is just too much here, I'm just not going to do it, and just close deals instead.
This is an interesting one. I do think, kind of back to Megan, your point earlier around having a roadmap for your overall system strategy is really important for this, because as much as you can automate things that your reps are already doing and push that back to Salesforce, I think is a great way to have reps adopt Salesforce without actually necessarily doing it. And so I think that is I do think it's telling that that the statistic right there, and I agree that the less time they spend in there could be higher adoption. Only it's indirect, maybe through maybe some other systems and where they work generally, like with sales reps. It's likely Gmail. And so how can you automate some of those things that they're already doing? Or even taking notes. Your rep is taking notes somewhere, but how can you build your CRM or your other system so they'll be taking notes in a place that's trackable, so other people can view it?
I almost think of it as even a rebranding exercise. It's not time that you're spending not selling. It's time that you're preparing for the next sale. You're cleaning up the data that leads to new pipe generation and revenue generation motions. It's not wasted time when we're inputting data and getting clean data into our CRM so that, again, we know our customers really well. We know our sales motion very well, and we're able to tap back into that in the future to generate more money. We've got another question here. Can you speak more to KPIs? How do you typically establish metrics to measure the success of your software? Megan, love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, I can start out here. I would say it all goes back to that purpose. What tool are you bringing on, and what's the business case that you've created to invest in it? So starting from that standpoint and working down into the more tactical pieces that go in. How do we know if, first of all, if adoption looks good? What metrics can we track and use? And then from there, okay, we've got our adoption baseline, but how do we know if this tool system is being utilized to the extent and driving that return on investment that we're looking for? And that may look different depending on different systems, but you could get creative, look at metrics like how much time is saved per action if you're looking at a system that automates something, or maybe it's more straightforward, like how many deals can be attributed to this tool that you use to source some of the information.
Yeah, I like the idea of, to your point, Megan, around goals. And usually when you're implementing new software, it's what are the outcomes you're driving? That could be maybe I'm implementing something to drive pipeline, generation. And then that software is typically not generating the pipeline for you, but are enabling and automating tasks that are leading indicators or activities towards generating that pipeline, whether that's I need to reach out to between 8 to 10 contacts on an account because we know a buying team is usually that large. We know what works around number of calls or number of emails and maybe number of accepted leads that you have to have so that it then converts into your typical conversion rate. And so I think thinking kind of what the outcome is and then thinking backwards or what are those leading indicators, and I would use those as the KPIs.
I'll double down just on Cindy saying that too. Again, like looking at the end goal and working backwards. Same thing that we do from a sales perspective. We look at our quota. We say, okay, how many months do I have to get there, and how many XYZ do I have to do that? Same thing here, right? So what are we really looking for? How is success defined? And I think, again, just working backwards from there to look at what's needed to be able to get to those goals is critical. I think to the point of earlier, the implementation doesn't really stop when we just buy the software and put your license key in, just like you said, Richard. Like, we've really got to do something to make sure that we're getting there. I would say too, for smaller businesses or really for any organization, make sure you also have an expert on board that can help you implement this correctly. You can see a lot of people who think that this is self-sustaining or that it's plug and play, when there's really just so many things that you don't know, right? We don't know, that old adage. And just to make sure that you have an implementation expert that can help you with workflows and with automation and integrations, because that's so important, especially around adoption. Good place to spend money.
I have a question myself for the panelists. We've talked a little bit about bringing reps in and as well as bringing managers in, but do you have any opinions on, is it a better approach to sort of go tops down with your CRO to kind of sound the horn and get the new CRM moving? Or is it better to kind of seed it with the reps first and go bottoms up and ultimately bring that data forward for sales leadership? Any thoughts on that?
I think you need to have a good mix, right? So we've got our leadership that builds our strategy. So here's why we made this phenomenally large investment in our CRM. Here's what we're hoping to get out of it. Here's the impact we're hoping it has to revenue, talent, whatever that is. And then saying, okay, great, like let's talk to the reps who are in there all day, every day, who use this. Let's talk to sales ops. Let's talk to enablement, who also uses this. Are we building this the right way? From a strategic perspective, have we considered all of those angles? Because I think without the strategy, we won't have the right goals, and without the users who are in there every day, we're not going to have the input that's really critical to seeing that adoption and success.
Yeah, I would agree with that and double down on it too. One of the key things for ops generally is you do have that executive strategy layer, but then it's too high. Compared to the rep and maybe even the frontline managers of execution. And so you kind of need to be that middle layer that ties, what is going on at that 10,000 foot level and bring it to, like, how do we actually execute on that strategy and vision by bringing in those frontline managers and reps. But it's hard to do that translation if you don't have that middle layer available.
Great point, Sam and Cindy. Totally agree with you there, and love the idea of being able to bridge from that 10,000 foot view to the front lines of the reps there, since those two areas when it comes to CRM, just totally different angles.
Amazing. Thanks all for your feedback. We have a really great question here. Can you share your key learnings from a CRM adoption that didn't go so well?
I don't actually have a good story around that. You guys?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific example. We've certainly had initiatives within the CRM that didn't get adopted as expected. I think one maybe initiative on adding contact roles, for example, that align with our medic sales methodology. Really, we revisited to determine where that fit in the priorities with the team, how maybe outside of the CRM, this was being tracked separately to ultimately determine whether this was a priority to double down on, invest more time in, or to focus on other areas as it relates to the sales cycle?
I feel like I have so many, actually, like lots of learnings. One that I would call out, I have two actually. One is, when you're designing your sales cycle, it can be very easy to listen to the squeaky wheel or the loudest voice in the room. And so you really focus on that. But then once you implement something, so this could be like close lost reasons or sales stages, and they work for maybe your first sale AEs, but they don't actually work for your account managers at renewal. But you typically use one sales path in a lot of different cases. I mean, you could use separate ones for different record types, but you usually start off with one. And so thinking through what are all the different major stakeholder groups that are going to use this, not just the really loud one in the room. Because then you're just going to have to go back and redo it again. And I've definitely had to do that before. The other one is too much change all at once. And so it's taking a step back and doing an iterative approach. We saw this a lot with when I implemented, what did we do? We moved over to Lightning for HighSpot very early on. It was like one of the first things I did at HighSpot. And it was, I feel like it was probably just too much change all at once. Because you had activities that were at the very bottom with those related lists, and then now they were on the side and they were behind maybe different tabs that you just don't have in Classic. And so we took it. We didn't move away from Lightning, but we essentially like re-looked at the layouts to be like, okay, what are elements that we could potentially take from Classic and put those into the Lightning view so that there is familiarity. And then we can modernize it more over time and taking that iterative approach.
We have a question here that kind of goes back to a point earlier that you made, Sam, around having that implementation expert, a workflows, a technical person who's sort of in charge of that realm. How do you determine the implementation expert? And then follow up to that, when it comes to change management, who do you usually turn to as the change agent?
Well, MSP for starters. I think there's the value of those communities, right? So thinking about something like Modern Sales Pros, where you can go, you can ask for advice and you can say, who's helped you and why. Understanding, the recommendations that come in, if people have hired those implementation experts multiple times, that's something key that I look for when hiring anybody. Give me some experience where you've hired this person, they've over-delivered, and then you hired them again and you got that same consistent experience. I think the other thing just to think about, right, and I know some people really struggle with, do I spend money on an implementation expert? So I got a CRM, do we spend money on that? We have outreach, do we spend money on that? LinkedIn, do we spend money on a trainer? But what you just really want to think about with that spend is that, time is money, again, another old adage, but what are you losing by trying to figure it out yourself? What mistakes are you making by trying to learn on your own or watching YouTubes or whatever about workflows and MQL scoring and all that, versus just bringing somebody in who could do it just like that. We were lucky enough to recently get some support on our side as we built that out, and it's amazing. I mean, it's you have three of us who are like, what, for hours, just looking at what somebody can do in 60 minutes. So that's the value of hiring somebody with a core competency around what you might not necessarily have a core competency around.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It goes to, what's your need for speed? And if it's much higher, you have that higher level of urgency, then hiring that external expert, I think is critical. But if you do have time and you want to learn it yourself or have someone on your team learn it, I think it's just important that you give them the space and acknowledgement that it is going to take some time to be that expert. And that they have that thirst and curiosity to be that expert. I'm all about cross-training the team, and if there's interest in being that admin or being that's me, all about it. If we have the time and resources to allocate that, but you definitely have to give them the time for sure.
Cindy's so right. And that's exactly how we started. You know, our Paige, our head of marketing, was still pretty new to the CRM game. And so, but we kind of looked at like, if we take time to allow her to learn and build these things on our own, what's that going to cost us? Not much of anything. So let's let that happen, right? But then as we build over the years, our contacts, our subscribers, our open rates, all that stuff went up. We started to think, well, what is it that we don't know at this point? So there's that tipping point, right, of when to bring in the expert. I love that too, just like from Cindy's perspective of letting somebody learn on their own, kind of figure it out, you know, give them the manual and then say, report back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's no one size fits all answer to the question. Really depends on the team and the interests that you're working with.
Absolutely.
Amazing answers and amazing questions. Shout out to the folks in the audience for keeping us on our toes. At this point, I would love to turn us over to really some closing thoughts and the key takeaways that each of our panelists here today. And what's the one thing that you would take away from this really rich discussion we've had on CRM adoption? Maybe Sam, you're unmuted, so if you could take us away.
You know, I think for me, it's just thinking through that adoption and how to bring in not only your leaders, but the CRO and your reps too. I think sometimes we get so, you know, we've got cones on and we've kind of got tunnel vision and siloed vision for doing our things, but just thinking about how the strategy and then the user input from your full team can really be of help to making sure you set this up correctly. That was a great takeaway for me.
I think it's about being user focused. And since we are talking about adoption, it's like, how can you make sure that everything you're doing has an eye for UX, kind of what you talked about, Megan, and making it easy for them and changing that brand. That Salesforce is hard. It's not. And we're here to make it easier. So let's adopt it.
Yeah, both great comments. I would say taking away that behavior drives process. It's not always about implementing the most sophisticated workflow and process that you could to be the best CRM implementer. It's really about investing that effort into ensuring your team's using processes in a way that resonates with them and ultimately providing those returns on your effort investments.
Amazing points from all. Thank you again for allowing me to moderate such a great panel. And thanks for joining us, everyone. With that, I will turn it back over to Eduardo. You're on mute, Eduardo.
Classic, right? That was my entrance all the time. I was like, I'm going to be muted. So somebody would say, you're muted. Thank you, everyone. That was really great. Panelists, you are amazing. Richard, you are an amazing moderator. We are going to wrap things up today. But first, we want to thank everyone for attending and for dropping your questions on the Q&A and the chat. We love having you here. Thank you for Intrahive for sponsoring this event. We love having you as a partner, and they're doing great things at Intrahive. So if you can go check their website right now. And thank you, our speakers, for providing this great content. And if you missed something, if you want to go back to all this knowledge and have it handy, the recording will be available later today in our MSP website. So make sure you check it out, and you will have all this great knowledge handy when you most need it. While the panelists and I hang out backstage, you can go ahead and go to the MSP website, check this recording, and check the upcoming events. So panelists, let's go backstage and we can hang out there. Thank you everyone for coming. We'll see you in the next event.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.